Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse from Leah Astrology, and this is going to be part 2 of my Q&A. If you're wondering why the background has changed and maybe the sound's changed and probably the resolution has changed on this video, it's because I've just recorded 20 minutes on my iPad as I normally do, and I've just found out it's got no sound on it. Brilliant. Mercury retrograde. Anyway, so on to the questions. So I'm going to start with Wendy's question, which is one thing I wonder is why sun transits pass me by and we don't feel it, but sometimes even small ones we do. Is it to do with the chart rulerships, or because we now notice it, etc., because of past experiences? So really good question. Basically, any chart at any time, we're always under a phenomenal amount of planetary movements. For example, the moon moves really quickly, so it's whizzing around our chart. Mercury moves pretty fast when he's not kind of going retrograde, and Venus and even Mars in some ways. But the point is that there is so much happening at any one time, we can't possibly experience it all on a conscious level. I would perhaps argue that it's all happening on an unconscious level, but it's kind of like walking down a busy street. You know, if you were noticing absolutely every single thing, from the expression on someone's face to the color of their shoes to what's maybe in their handbag to what's in the window beside you of the shop, if you noticed everything, you would be crazy. You wouldn't be able to function. So I think with something like this, then the psyche, the unconscious, kind of filters out the information that is not relevant for us at that particular moment in time. Also, as well, there are some techniques that suggest, particularly from older traditional astrology, that sometimes the charts, there are parts of the chart that aren't active, and other parts are active. I think this is maybe connected with something called perfections, where a certain planet will sort of rules a year, and therefore that planet is going to be very sensitive to particular transits that are going on. Sometimes I think as well there are parts of ourselves, it is to do with our experience and our own awareness and what has happened to us. So yes, past experiences are going to make an impression as well, and it depends on how aware we are and how developed we are and what is relevant for our learning at that time. So yeah, I don't think everything is going to be experienced on a conscious level. It's what's relevant for us, and that's the most important thing. So the next question, I have my big list here that I've printed out. Olive says, what does it mean when you have Pluto square to Saturn and also to the nodal axis? Hi Olive, me and Olive are friends on Facebook, and Olive and I have kind of similar charts. So in other words, she knows that I have also been experiencing Pluto square to my nodal axis and also square to Saturn. In my natal chart, my Saturn is very close to my north node. So Pluto transits generally put us under pressure to change something in our lives. Pluto comes along and he kind of intensifies our experience, because he says, you know, you've got to focus on this, you've got to look at this, we can't miss this now, we can't bypass this now, you have to be here and you have to be taking control of what you can take control of and eradicating those things that aren't relevant to you anymore. We've got an idea of regeneration going on in some way. Now Pluto square to the nodes, any square to the nodes, it's suggested that it's like a misstep, something hasn't been done. So for me, for us at the moment, we've been going through this process of figuring out what hasn't been done as far as taking control, taking back our power. Where have we disempowered ourselves, or where have we not dealt with shadow material, deeper material within ourselves that is holding us back? Because Saturn is a principle that's to do with limitation. So Pluto has come along and said, right, we need to break down this resisting. Stop resisting. What are you resisting? That's got to change, because it's holding you back. It's stopping you from fulfilling your potential. It's stopping you from fulfilling your soul's evolution, because we're aiming towards the North Node. So we've got this idea then that Pluto is really challenging us to break down these limiting thoughts, limiting behaviors. It's stopping us resisting, and it's forcing, because Pluto has that ability sometimes, he forces us to be accountable, to take responsibility, so that we can then accomplish what we need to accomplish in this lifetime. But the first step is to do what wasn't done before, the missed step, which was taking control, eliminating what isn't working, and dealing with what is underneath everything, as far as sort of fears are concerned, and sort of shadow material. So it's a very intense and very, very powerful transit. I think it was Rob Hand that said any sort of transits between Pluto and Saturn, it's like being between a rock and a hard place. And yes, I can definitely feel that in my own life, but I also feel how empowering it is. How empowering it is to say to yourself, do you know what? I'm not going to pretend this is not happening anymore. I am going to take responsibility. I am going to grow up. You know, we're being forced, Pluto, to grow up, Saturn, so that we can develop further on our spiritual paths. So it's a very intense transit, and it's not always pleasant. That's what I've found personally, but it can also be incredibly empowering, and that is also what I'm now experiencing within myself too. So Jan then said, or still on the theme of Pluto, what are the major themes of transiting Pluto crossing the midheaven? So your midheaven is the highest point in your chart, right at the top. It's kind of like a flag. If you imagine yourself being like a pirate ship, you'd be able to see the flag from a long way away. It warns other sailors of who you are, and that's kind of like our midheaven. The midheaven is the standard that we're flying, that says, I am here, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, this is what I want to project out into the world, this is what I respect in other people too, this is where I want to go. It's like a big arrow pointing upwards. I want to go there, please. So when Pluto comes along, first of all, to the midheaven, he's going to maybe change your direction. Maybe it's a change of direction, change of standards. You're looking at eliminating what isn't working when it comes to career, because often the midheaven can be connected with career. Sometimes people close a business, sometimes they open a business. It's a dramatic shift. Sometimes people get fired. Sometimes people get made redundant. Sometimes people start something that's like their own business and become very successful at that. We have to remember that Pluto is not all bad. No planet is all bad. Sometimes we go through difficult experiences, and sometimes we go through amazing experiences when Pluto or any other planet, is affecting us really, really strongly. But yes, loss of job or starting something really that is going to set us on the path to success. Remember, Pluto rules riches. If we do lose a job around this time, then it can be because we're not empowered in that position, or we just aren't really delving into the depths of our resources, and we need to do something which has a greater challenge. We need to do something else, basically. I've seen it with a divorce, and I've seen it with someone getting married, because it is a great big change of status. I've also seen it with someone who was widowed as well. It can also relate to our family, this part of the chart, because again it's associated with sort of status, and it's with Pluto on your midheaven, it's going to oppose your IC. So the IC is the very root of the chart, which is to do with family. And where you come from. So sometimes there can be changes in family structure, because currently Pluto is moving through the sign of Capricorn. So there might be changes in family structures and things like that. I have seen it where people are perhaps dealing with older parents. So maybe it's a time when you're sort of thinking about, maybe I need to write a will, or my parents need to write a will. We need to make sure that everything is in place, because of course Pluto talks of the inevitable, which is death, and it's something that we are all going to die at some point. And sometimes when Pluto comes along and makes a very strong transit, we start thinking about that. We start thinking about what will happen when our parents are gone, or our family is gone, or this kind of thing. And so it's a very good time for preparing. It does not in any way sort of say this is going to happen at this time. It's talking about we have to confront it. We have to be okay with it as much as we can do. We have to accept that death is part of life, whether it's literally or whether it is metaphorically. So it can be a very good time for sort of making sure that everything's in place and where it should be. Also, I have seen it as well where it can actually relate to the death of someone that's occurred in childhood, and yet maybe if somebody had a significant person in their life, they lost a significant person in their family, so father, mother, grandparent, and it made a huge impact on them as a child, but they couldn't express that, or they weren't able to deal with that because they were so young. Sometimes when Pluto comes and knocks on the door of the midheaven, then it's like we open to all of that experience, that previous experience that we had when we were too young to be able to consciously look at it. So that, again, unconscious material can come up. And so that can also be part of it as well, because it's part of going through and sifting through what is important for us, and getting rid of the old ghosts, you know, the things that haunt us. And often the things that haunt us are the things that we've not allowed ourselves to look at. So Pluto can be intense, he can be heavy, but at the same time he is transformative. And the idea is then to put us into a situation which is ultimately going to be one where we are stronger, and one where you can put the best of yourself out there into the world, which is the midheaven, as I was saying before, sort of what you want to put out there. Right now you need to feel as though you're kind of showing your strengths and showing where you are strong. One thing I should also say as well, I remember this is a very, very, very long time ago, years and years and years ago, and I spoke to somebody who, let's just say that they weren't really the sort of the best of kind of person, and they were sometimes involved in things they shouldn't be involved in. And they had the Pluto transits going across the midheaven. And basically Pluto, the most worst way you could use Pluto is committing a crime, because he can rule crime in the underworld. But the thing is, if you're going to commit a crime when Pluto is crossing your midheaven, remember that this is the most visible part of the chart, so you're going to get caught basically. So don't be naughty, don't do it, not when Pluto is crossing your midheaven. Okay, so next question. SONNJA says, what could happen when Jupiter is transit my Venus but square natal Mars? So I'm presuming you mean conjunct your Venus. So Venus in your natal chart is going to be square to Mars if Jupiter is conjunct Venus at the moment. So we already have a bit of tension in your natal chart between what you love and what you want, what's good for you, and kind of just what you want to go for, what you desire. Jupiter and Venus aspects, sort of positive aspects, can be experienced as being something really nice, something really pleasant. We've got this feeling of wanting to enjoy life. That there's wanting to indulge yourself in some way. Now, whether that is indulging yourself with food, or indulging yourself with just pleasant things, pleasant experiences in life, or indulging yourself with love and lovers, you know, it could be that too. But with Mars involved, the square to Mars, it can get a little bit out of hand, because Jupiter tends to exacerbate or magnify or increase. We've got increased desires, increased wants. and then the need to feel good. And so we get a little bit of hedonism coming in here. It's sort of to hell with it, I'm just going to go for it. It's what I want, it's what I like. So what I would say is that it could be in some ways quite a fun time, because there's a little bit less of worrying about what other people might think, because you've got that bravery of Mars has been increased, the courage has been increased, and that you are desiring to have good experiences in your life, and maybe there is the opportunity for more love or the opportunity for more money, but at the same time it's being aware that maybe you might be taking on too much, because that's also what can happen when Jupiter is square to Mars, that you want to do everything. You don't want to rule anything out. You just want to do everything. You want to have that challenge. And so that can be the problem, because you might sort of get a little bit further down the line and realize you've taken on too much. So that's the thing to watch, that it's great to indulge yourself, but make sure that you're not doing too much so that you don't end up feeling overwhelmed later down the line. Okay, on to the next question, which is from Pam, and she says, when a major planet for your horoscope crosses into your first house, and then begins to aspect other planets due to transits. So I think she's talking about when we have a major transit, a major planet. So for example, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, coming over the ascendant into the first house. So firstly, this is really important. The ascendant is a very important point in the chart. It's the most sensitive point in the chart. And the ascendant is the point that is calculated at our time of birth. That's why the time of birth is so important. We need the time to get the ascendant. So there is an association with birth and beginnings. It's the first house, the first thing that we're seeing. And so actually the 12th house, where the planet has just been and where it's coming from, is like a time of gestation. And so any planet crossing into the first house does tend to represent a new chapter of some kind in our lives. It also is kind of up there in our faces. It's like this, you know, you can't not see it. And this is because there is a sort of optical illusion that things on the horizon look bigger. If you were in a really big flat field and you watched the moon rising, like the full moon rising, it would seem huge, and it's called the moon illusion. You can go and look it up in Wiki. But that feeling of it being right up in your face means that it's very important then to start to incorporate what that planet is talking about, what it's trying to teach you. So generally speaking, Jupiter is asking to make our lives bigger and to be more expansive, more adventurous, to learn more, to go where we've never been before. Saturn is wanting us to be more responsible. He wants us to set our limits responsibly, and to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves too much. He wants us to be accountable, and he definitely wants us to accomplish something, because he knows that we're very capable. So sometimes our situation can feel very serious when Saturn crosses the ascendant, but he is teaching us ways to be more productive, or to really help us to accomplish what we came here to do, and he's setting good foundations in place for future accomplishments as well when he crosses over the ascendant. If it's Uranus, Uranus wants to break us out of old ways of seeing the world. We need to see the world with a fresh perspective. We've got to be able to take on these new ideas. We've got to do something different. Maybe we want to be someone different, or we want to appear literally different. Sometimes Uranus crossing the ascendant can mean that we lose a lot of weight or we gain a lot of weight, you know, whichever way around it is. But usually there's a feeling of wanting to be free. And so whatever is happening, we're starting to see the world through the planet's eyes. Neptune is going to spiritualize. Neptune spiritualizes what it touches. So we might feel a bit confused and uncertain about who we are and what this is all about, but it will really teach us to listen to our intuition and tap into our imagination. And then Pluto is going to eradicate what is not helpful in our world view and how we're interacting with other people. And it's going to change, very much change and transform who we are, completely change our outlook, irrevocable change once again with Pluto, so that we can feel stronger to be the person that we are. So anything crossing the ascendant is going to be a powerful new start of some kind, depending on the nature of the planet involved. And when that planet then starts to aspect other planets in your chart, well, then we start to weave the story together. The planet is reaching out to those other planets in your natal chart and sort of saying, well, we perhaps need to incorporate some Mars to help us with this journey, or we need to incorporate some Venus in some way, or there's a problem here with your natal Saturn, let's sort that out. So it's like a conversation between the planets, and it is really going to depend on what your natal chart is like, and what aspects it makes, and what aspects are being made by the transiting planet. But if you can very generally just think about the planet crossing the ascendant, a planet crossing the ascendant is a new start, and that's going to give you some material to be going on with. The next question is Alessandra. What in general does it mean when a solar eclipse happens at the same degree of a natal planet, such as the moon or Jupiter? Is it necessary to interpret aspects of the transit chart of the eclipse, or the progress chart, or the natal chart together? Okay, so Alessandra, when a planet is being eclipsed, then what I tend to see is that planet then becomes very, very sensitive, particularly to other transits that are going on. But we're also seeing kind of the shadow side, or maybe we're seeing something about that part of ourselves that we haven't seen before. So, for example, I was talking about Jupiter just now and sort of needing to be more adventurous. So if the eclipse is conjunct Jupiter, there possibly can be some kind of belief, because Jupiter can stand for beliefs, some kind of belief that you've been holding about your life that perhaps has not allowed you to stretch as far as you would like to stretch in life. Maybe it's not allowed you to be as adventurous as you would like to be. Maybe you've not had enough faith in yourself because of some belief that you've been holding. And the eclipse will come along and sort of highlight that in some way, because it's the shadow of that planet. In the same way with the moon, if the eclipse is conjunct your moon, then there's likely going to be something revealed, something that was in shadow now becomes visible, so that you can see where you've maybe got an old habit that is not helping you in some way, or a feeling that you hadn't acknowledged before, or maybe sometimes it can be literal and there's a change of circumstance in your family or in your home or with your mother or sort of mother figure, because there's an eclipse to the moon which can rule family, home and sort of female figures in your life. So we've just generally got the idea that planet then becomes sensitized. We can see some shadow side to that planet, or we see something about ourselves that we didn't see before, which is correlated to the nature of that planet concerned. Steph says, what's the Saturn return look like at 27, 28, and then at 56, 57? How are they the same and different? Okay, so we have a Saturn return roughly sort of 29, 30, 31, and then we have another Saturn return at 56, 57 years old, because that's the cycle of Saturn. It takes him around 29-ish, 29 and a half years to go around the natal chart. So the first Saturn return, I think the main difference is just, if you think about the sort of way life is generally speaking, at age 30, and then as you're coming up to your 60s. At age 30, very generally speaking, we've just come to that point where we realise that even though we know we're not old, we kind of realise that we're not really young anymore. We're out of our 20s, or almost out of our 20s. And so we start to maybe think about things like settling down, having a child, getting into a long-term relationship, finding a career, or figuring out what the hell we're going to do with our lives. And there can be that pressure to settle down, to be grown up, because that's Saturn's thing. He wants us to be an adult and to look after ourselves, to parent ourselves. And so the first Saturn return can sometimes feel a bit harder, I think. Obviously, it's going to depend on our overall nature and what the condition of Saturn is in the natal chart as well. Like if Saturn is really well aspected in the natal chart, then maybe your first Saturn return comes with sort of a feeling of ease. But if it's not well aspected, then we might find it a bit more challenging, all of these ideas of getting serious about life and what it is we want to do and accomplish. And so I think that's the nature of the first one, where we sort of get that idea of leaving behind our youth and starting to really grow up and take on all of these normal responsibilities that adults have, such as paying the bills and raising kids and having the job and having to manage our lives effectively, because we know that we can't do anything. We can't do everything anymore. Not do anything. We can't do everything. Which is the youthful part of us always sort of says, oh, I can do absolutely everything. But we have to crystallize our intention with Saturn, and we do have to make some hard choices sometimes. Now, the second Saturn return, we've obviously done a lot of that by the time we get to the second Saturn return. We've done the job thing, we've found our career, we hopefully have. We've maybe had the long-term relationship, and the kids are growing up and this kind of thing. And so the second Saturn return sort of comes along and says, have you accomplished what you set out to do at the first Saturn return? So think back to when you were 30. What were you hoping for? Is this what you got? Or did you change direction? And that's fine if you did. But there is an element of, are you happy with what you accomplished? Because now time is limited. There is only so much time ahead. Generally speaking, we start to come to a realization that there is less time ahead than there has been. And that's just life, you know, that we only have so long on this planet in this incarnation. So we do sometimes start to, in the second Saturn return, also be very aware of our age. And that because we've got a limitation on time, we need to really start to think about what's the most important thing. What are the things that I've left undone that need now to be done? You know, is there a novel that just sat languishing in my desk that never got written? Time to get it out, or get rid if you don't want to do it, and there's something else that's more important. How do I envisage my old age going? You know, do I have a pension? No, I haven't got that one myself. I've got to get that sorted out at some point, I guess. I think that the second Saturn return is very definitely a different feeling to it because of the life experience that you've had. But there are still some of the similar kinds of questions about what do I want to do with my time? And what is it that I want to actually manifest in my life? And if we're not happy around this time, if we realise that we haven't accomplished what we set out to do, then we can make some course adjustments in life so that we can proceed. It is perhaps naturally one of those times where sometimes long-term relationships may end around this time. There may be divorces around this time because we realise that we've perhaps grown apart, or that the relationship is just challenged at this time because we realise we've grown apart, and therefore we find a way back to each other, and you sort of start a new chapter together. So that's also a possibility. But a lot of summing up, I think, is very characteristic of the second Saturn return. And it can be a really productive time, even if we feel it's a bit heavy, even if we feel very serious about what's going on and sort of look in the mirror and kind of go, oh God, this is exactly what I was doing this morning when I was putting my makeup on to do this. I was just like, oh God, I've aged. Where did this come from? I've got a big stellium of planets, a lot of presence in Aries. Aries is all about youthfulness. And so yeah, I'm not so happy about the lines and whatever. But that's part of it. We do grow up, we do get older, we do get lined, you know, and they're lines of wisdom, and we need to accept that we have been through all these different experiences in life that have made their mark on us, but it's what else we're going to do, and what do we want to leave behind? What do we want to contribute to this world? That can also be a very important question as well. I mean, we're not all authors and painters and, you know, all of the creative things, but maybe there is a legacy, you know, a legacy that you're going to pass down to your children or the young people that you work with. What are you teaching? What is it that you're doing or being in the world that can make this a better place? What are you leaving behind? And so these are also some of the questions that we can ask when you're having your second Saturn return.